The top 10 biggest explosions. After World War II and throughout the Cold War, the Nevada test site in southern Nevada was the trial ground for nearly 1,000 nuclear explosions. Residents of Las Vegas, only 2 hours south, could look from their homes and see the mushroom clouds that arose from the 100 above-ground test explosions. One of these mini-tests was a 104 kiloton explosion, equivalent to 104,000 tons of TNT, which was triggered by a bomb codenamed Sedan. The explosion blasted away 12 million tons of desert sand and created one of the largest man-made crater on Earth. The nuclear fallout from Sedan was devastating as well, reportedly irradiating more U.S. civilians than any other domestic nuclear test. One of the biggest non-nuclear explosions in history happened on April 16, 1947, when a ship carrying ammonium nitrate caught fire, exploded, and subsequently triggered a series of smaller fires and explosions. While dock workers and firefighters were working to suppress the initial fire, the ammonium nitrate exploded, lifting another ship out of the water and sending shrapnel and debris 1 or 2 miles away. The flaming debris and oil set more ships and buildings on fire, which blazed for days afterward. This disaster claimed the lives of at least 550 people, including all the Texas City firefighters, as well as destroying a large portion of Texas City. The explosion that permanently grounded the airship Hindenburg is one of the most infamous events in history. The LZ-129 Hindenburg was a symbol of success and innovation, making it the pride of Nazi Germany in the late 1930s. However, the pioneers who built these airships failed to consider the fact that hydrogen, which was used in massive amounts to keep the ships airborne, is extremely flammable. On May 3, 1937, a sudden spark ignited the hydrogen inside the ship and set the whole vessel ablaze. The explosion rapidly incinerated the ship and 35 people died. We can thank the Hindenburg disaster for teaching us that humans should never ride around in a floating balloon of highly explosive gas. During World War II, the United States had the honor of becoming the first and only nation on Earth to utilize atomic weapons in war. Near the tail end of World War II, Americans were ready to bring the war with Japan to a quick end. The U.S. dropped the first bomb, Little Boy, on Hiroshima in an attempt to force Japan's surrender. Little Boy triggered an explosion equal to 12,500 tons of TNT and leveled 62,000 buildings in the surrounding mile from its initial explosion. The death toll eventually exceeded 200,000 after the event because of both the destruction from the explosion and the adverse health effects from the nuclear fallout. 3 days after the bombing of Hiroshima, U.S. military forces struck against Japan a second time. This time, the U.S. delivered a bomb called the Fat Man to Nagasaki, to the southwest of Hiroshima. Fat Man was a larger and more efficient bomb in comparison to Little Boy, weighing in at 10,000 pounds and capable of 20,000 tons worth of high explosive damage. But the mountains and bodies of water of Nagasaki minimized the damage it dealt. However, the aftermath of Fat Man was still devastating and was responsible for at least 87,000 deaths and the destruction of 70% of the city's industrial zone. On March 1, 1954, the United States triggered the largest thermonuclear detonation in history. Operation Castle was the name used by the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission and the Department of Defense for their research and testing of Castle Bravo, a 23,500-pound thermonuclear weapon. The developers of Castle Bravo severely miscalculated how powerful this new weapon would be, and its test explosion yielded 50 megatons of power. It's approximately the equivalent of 50 million tons of TNT instead of the predicted 5 megaton explosion. The fallout eventually killed 655 residents who lived on the nearby islands with over-radiation, and traces of radioactive material were discovered in Japan, the US, India, Australia, and even Europe. It was the peak of the Cold War between the United States and the USSR when the Soviet Union's N-1 exploded at launch. The US and USSR were in the middle of the infamous space race, developing technology to send humans out to explore space. Although the Soviets were the first to launch a man into orbit around the Earth, they weren't quite as successful with lunar landings. In February 1969, while attempting to launch their N-1 rocket towards the moon, a malfunction in the construction of the ship triggered a massive explosion that wrecked the ship and the launch pad. It's unclear how much was lost for the Soviets in terms of money and resources, but our Soviet friends never did make it to the moon. The only naturally occurring event on this list is possibly the most mysterious. Paris. The Tunguska event occurred in June 1908 in an unpopulated forest of Siberia. The explosion seems to have been caused when a meteor hurtling towards Earth exploded in midair before impact. The explosion is estimated to have been 1,000 times greater than one caused by the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima in World War II. It caused a 5.0 magnitude earthquake and completely flattened a few kilometers of the forest. Although the explosion is widely accepted to be caused by a meteor, a lack of crater in the Earth leads many to believe that this explosion could have been caused by something supernatural. During World War I, the trading port city of Halifax in Nova Scotia, Canada, was founded and became a crucial point for transporting troops, crucial supplies, and munitions across the Atlantic. On December 16, 1917, the Norwegian ship called LMO left and collided with a French munitions ship called the Mont Blanc. The collision triggered a fire on Mont Blanc, which was carrying 2,300 tons of picric acid, 200 tons of TNT, 35 tons of high-octane gasoline, and 10 tons of gun cotton. Before anyone could react, the French supply ship exploded, which resulted in 1,800 deaths, 9,000 casualties, and caused 200 people to go blind and destroyed almost the entirety of North Halifax, which included 1,600 homes. This explosion was so massive, windows from 50 miles away were shattered from the shockwave. All of this makes the Great Halifax Explosion the biggest man-made explosion from the pre-nuclear age. Number 1 on this list of biggest explosions is the unspeakably massive explosion triggered by the nuclear weapon called Tsar Bomba. In the middle of the tense political relations between the Americans and the Soviets, the Tsar Bomba was born. The test took place on September 1st, 1961, breaking a 3-year-long agreement in which neither the U.S. or the USSR would engage in nuclear testing. Even though the bomb was airdropped onto the test zone and was set off in midair, the explosion triggered a 5.0 earthquake that could be measured all across the world. Its mushroom cloud grew 37 miles high, and third-degree burns were possible for more than 100 miles away. This absolutely gargantuan explosion could have leveled all of Paris and was measured to be 50 megatons, 1,400 times stronger than the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings combined. Tsar Bomba triggered the absolute biggest explosion in history, and we can only hope it will stay that way.